Today we're taking a look back at the 2021 NHL Draft, and I'm going to give you my opinion on which teams were the biggest winners and losers, and that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're taking a look at the 2021 NHL Draft, and we're going to talk about which teams I thought did the best and some of the teams that did the worst, hence the winners and losers. Now this is kind of an annual event here that I've done on the channel over the last 3 or 4 drafts now, and it's something that, many people like to do. It's early, so keep in mind that this is just an opinion based on what we know about these prospects so far. A lot of times you look back on drafts 5, 7, 8, 10 years down the road and you're completely wrong. Some players that you thought were surefire hits turn out to be a bust, and some that you thought might not have any chance turns out to be a decent player. I also do not claim to be a scout. I know there's many people here across YouTube and different media platforms who try to give themselves that designation. I'm not going to pretend to be a scout. I do watch a lot of junior hockey, a lot of highlights on YouTube, that kind of stuff, to try to keep up with these prospects as best I can, but I do think it's fair to say I take more of like the Bob McKenzie approach, who relies on a lot of other resources and opinions to kind of form a general consensus. If you look at Bob McKenzie of TSN when he put out his rankings, this is not only based on what he thinks. He surveys a lot of different scouts and people who are more in tune with watching these prospects and kind of forms a general consensus off a broad variety of opinions. That's what I like to do. I don't use just one source to get my information. I follow a large variety of places who like to talk about prospects and all this kind of stuff and form a little bit of my own opinion. And like I said, I watch a lot of junior hockey as well. So that's kind of how I'm coming up with all these draft related videos. When I talk about prospects, that's kind of where everything is determined. So I just wanted to get that out here in the open. So we're going to talk about some of the teams that I thought did the best and the worst. Now let's get started with, on the positive side here, with a winning team I thought did a fantastic job and walked away from the 2021 draft feeling accomplished, and that's the Columbus Blue Jackets. They went into this draft with a lot of picks, especially early first round picks, and I must say that I was impressed, and I think they hit on all of them. They ended up taking Kent Johnson with their first pick, number 5 overall, a real big creative center who's going to be a tremendous player for them. I think they need center depth. He can certainly be that kind of player. I think he can play a big role. Obviously, they took Cole Sillinger with the number 12 pick. That's another player that, second generation talent. His father was a long-time NHL player, a pretty decent one. A guy who got traded a lot, was known for being the trade deadline acquisition for many years, but hopefully Cole's future is a little bit more stable than that, but still a real solid hockey player that most people would agree that they did a good job. So they got themselves a couple of really good forwards to kind of build in to what they're trying to do in Columbus. We've also saw them take Corson Kuhlman's later in the first round, pretty real solid, decent defenseman there who can help as well. I mean, obviously they traded Seth Jones at the draft, or around the draft time on the first day. They got themselves, a pretty decent package, I think. They also got a first round pick for next year as part of that. Of course, they get young defenseman Adam Boqvist, who should be a bright part of their future. And of course, the pick that they used on Cole Sillinger was part of that as well. They swapped first rounders with Chicago, so Chicago gets a lower first round pick. They get to move up, and said plus they get Boqvist and a first rounder next year. Now the next year pick is lottery protected, so if the Hawks have a terrible season and end up in the top 10, it will get deferred to a year out in 2023. But still, I think the Jackets overall did a lot of really good things. I think they did a decent return on the Seth Jones trade, and they also did well on these picks. Now, of course, we also saw Columbus continue to shake things up, where they made a big trade with Cam Atkinson and Jakub Voracek. That's a straight 1-for-1 deal, what we did not see coming. Not a shocker that Voracek was traded, and I'm not even completely shocked that he was traded to Columbus, but I was surprised to see them move Atkinson, because obviously, as much as the Jackets had a really good draft, they have struggled in recent years with some of their top players wanting to stay there, and Atkinson just seemed to be the epitome of players who wanted to be there and be part of that long term, likely retire there down the road, and I'm just a little surprised to see him be moved, but clearly they wanted to continue shaking things up, and I don't know if the Jackets are completely done. Now, they also went out and used one of their draft selections to acquire young defenseman Jake Bean from Carolina, who I thought that was another great pickup. Obviously, they lose Jones, but they get themselves a really good D in the draft. They get themselves Boqvist, they get themselves Bean. That's good work here by Jarmo Kekalainen. And overall, I thought they had a real solid couple of days. Jumping over to a team that I think was one of the bigger losers in this draft is the Edmonton Oilers. I really don't know what Ken Holland was thinking. When we get to their selection in the first round, there was a prime opportunity for them to address their goaltending of the future. When they were ready to pick in the first round, Jesper Wallstedt, the Swedish goalie who is expected to be a potential elite goalie in the NHL, was on the board, and they chose to skip over him and trade back. I mean, I was completely flabbergasted when they ended up doing this. The Minnesota Wild, who we'll talk about here shortly, took advantage of this. Yes, they get multiple picks in return, but still, they had a prime opportunity to address their goaltending of the future because they don't really have a clear-cut stud goalie in their system. They have, one or two guys that might be like a Stuart Skinner, but at the stage of Skinner's career, it's hard to say he's really going to amount to an NHL goalie, let alone a star NHL goalie. So, they had a prime chance there, and they blew it. I don't understand what Holland was doing. Obviously, if you look at some of the other moves that they're either have completed or are rumored to be completing, like the Zach Hyman signing that's likely coming, that I like Hyman. I think he's a good fit for the Oilers, but it's a lot of money and a lot of term. They brought in Duncan Keith. Yes, there's the intangibles, but the cost was still questionable. I understand what Hyman and Keith will bring, and I understand what Holland's trying to do here. I really do. I understand what they feel they're missing, and he's listening to not only his own opinion and his staff, but the top players in that team. I get it, but it's not so much what you want to do, it's how you do it or the price you got to pay to do it, and it's just some questionable options there. Now, the Oilers ended up, after trading back, selecting Xavier Bourgault, who's not a bad player. It's not even so much that they chose him. It's just that they completely had an opportunity wasted with Wallstedt. And regardless of what the rest of the draft went like for them, that was just a major wasted opportunity that I think if I'm an Oilers fan, I just can't forgive them for. Wallstedt could be a player to come back and haunt them for a really, really long time. So I guess it's one of those scenarios we'll have to look back on in a few years once we have a better outlook of the development of these players. But that was a major miss in my opinion. Another big winner here was the Minnesota Wild, who I just mentioned took full advantage of the Edmonton Oilers and Ken Holland in this scenario. Billy Guerin had an opportunity he saw to come up and grab another young, solid stud goaltender, and he did just that. I mean, obviously, he talked to Edmonton. They were not interested in taking a particular player. They were comfortable moving back. So, yeah, he had to give up a little bit of capital there, but what the heck why wouldn't you do that? Come on. He's got Kakinen, who he did not lose in the expansion draft, so they're lucky there that they lost Carson Soucy. I mean, Soucy's a pretty decent defenseman, don't get me wrong, but Kakinen to me was the more obvious choice from the Kraken in that expansion draft, and now they add Wallstedt. In a few years down the road, when Talbot's done with the Wild, they could have a Kakinen-Wallstedt goalie tandem. I mean, that could be phenomenal for them. So, I mean... They took advantage of Edmonton. I mean, they had some other good things happen in the draft too, but that by far was enough to get them on my winners list just for that move alone from Bill Guerin. I mean, the Wild are slowly building their prospect pool to be one of the better ones in the league. It was maybe no more than 2 to 3 years ago. Things were not looking good in Minnesota for the future, but he's made some tough, questionable moves with the buyouts of Parise and Suter. We're going to see some other things here. He's rumored to be swinging a big. He's rumored to be trying to hit a home run here and get Jack Eichel. They have the Kaprizov situation. That contract negotiation is not going well, so we'll see how things go in that regard. But all things said, at this draft, they did a phenomenal job, in my opinion. They also used their other first-round pick at number 26 to get Carson Lambos, another solid D prospect. So all in all, especially in the first round, and the way he took advantage of Edmonton, I really like what Minnesota did here. Now, another team that I feel was on the losing side, but it's a team that I'm not going to be as hard on as a lot of people, is the Ottawa Senators. And, of course, anybody following this channel knows that the Sens are the team I cheer for the most. So, clearly, I have no problem being hard on them when I feel they deserve it. But I understand where they're going with a lot of these picks, but taking Tyler Boucher at number 10 was very much a surprise. Obviously, they had something in mind here going into this draft. They want to be a really big, strong team that's hard to play against. And now another reason I will not judge their picks as much as many other people, as I really think that Trent Mann is a tremendous guy in charge of running the draft for the Senators, and he's had a lot of things criticized over him in the past and have turned out to be great picks. So I trust the process there when it comes to their drafting and developing, but my only gripe with Ottawa's picks is that they're all players that were pretty much taken, you can say this about most of their picks, they were off the board, higher than many people projected. So if they really wanted these guys, they could have still gotten them, but to me, they could have had an opportunity where they traded back, got extra picks, extra assets, and done things differently that way. Now, the other thing with Ottawa is that they have a very, very deep prospect pool. They have a lot of picks between last year, this year, to next year. Like, they're loaded with picks and prospects. So you can't have them all turn into NHL players, at least not for you. So I understand that. So the ability to add additional assets in that way might not have been as appealing to them as in prior years, but still, they could have been situations where these picks could have been traded for other assets. I don't know. I honestly feel like the players they picked, I get why they picked them. I don't have any problem with them drafting those particular guys, especially Tyler Boucher, who I think will be a real solid bottom six player who can really be that physical, tough guy that you don't want to play against. And, he's a second-generation player. His dad's Brian Boucher, longtime goalie, broadcaster now. Like, good pickup. They obviously have an affinity and a trend here. They are in love with that U.S. National Team Development Program and guys that are second-generation players. Like, they have a long list of players that they've taken in the last 5 years from that program whose fathers were all NHL players. It's kind of crazy, but for the most part, a lot of them have worked out or are looking to be working out, so I'm not going to question that. But like I said, I just think that they're all players that were drafted well ahead of where they needed to be. They could have moved back, got some extra picks, made some other moves, and if they walked away with a deep prospect pool that they already have, along with the players they've taken, but had some extra guys too, then I would have been a lot more happier with how things went. But like I said, I think long term, we'll look back and these players will likely work out to be decent selections, at least a few of them. But you're going to be some opportunities missed there with some other skilled players that were, left on the board when they had a chance to take them. Next up on the winning side, we're going to say the Detroit Red Wings. I was quite pleased with how Steve Yzerman handled the draft. I know some Red Wings fans were a little bit questionable, but obviously with their highest first-round pick, they took Simon Edvinsson of Sweden, a really big, lanky, tall defenseman who seems to be pretty good at both ends of the ice. I know there were maybe some other players that might have been a little sexier or flashier that they might have been able to select in this case, but at the end of the day, he's a big defenseman. They've had a lot of luck with Swedish defensemen in the past. They seem to be very high in this guy. Not surprised to see this pick at all. I really suspected that he would be a player they've zeroed in on. And of course, on top of Edvinsson, Yzerman makes a trade and moves up to grab a great goaltender in Sebastian Cossa of the Edmonton Oil Kings. That was a tremendous pickup. I really thought they would go for Wallstedt because of their long history of taking Swedish players and having a lot of success with them. So I thought Wallstedt might be their guy instead. But either way, some feel like Cossa is going to be as good or better than Wallstedt. Only time will tell. Like I said, there is a difference of opinions out there. But when it comes to Cossa, he has a great potential as well. I was just happy to see the Red Wings address their goaltending. Like I said, that's something that the Edmonton Oilers were another team that just as bad as Detroit, they really needed to do that, and they whiffed on it. So the fact that Yzerman didn't, which we should know by now, he's a great GM. Those two picks alone were absolutely tremendous opportunities that were not wasted, and they get some great players to add to their pool to make things a little bit better here for their rebuild. Now, another team I'm going to put on the losing side was the Arizona Coyotes. Obviously, I know they drafted Shane Doan's son, Josh, which is fine. I have no problem with the bloodline connection. We see that quite often. We've seen it a few other times here in the course of the last couple of days with the NHL teams reuniting family and brothers that way. It seems to be a major trend right now, which is, that's totally cool, and I get that. However, they probably could have gotten him with a later pick. So again, like Ottawa, I don't have a problem with who they picked. It's when they picked them. After Doan, they took Fedotov, and he's another player that, many people were even really questioning that choice. Not a player I was overly familiar with, but I know many said he's a player that might not have even been drafted, let alone taken nearly that high. Like I said, I really thought the Coyotes would go in a little bit of a different direction in this draft. We've seen in previous years under the John Chaker regime that they made some really odd choices. They were really common for them to go off the board and really be high on a particular player that other teams weren't. And really at this point so far, we don't really see any real cases of those really working out for those players. I mean, that's on a variety of occasions in past drafts, including Victor Soderstrom, Barrett Hayton, etc. And are any of them, big time NHL stars at this point? No, they're not. I mean, it's still early though, so we'll have to wait and see before we get too critical of them. But, it's just a case of Arizona just making some odd selections here. So hopefully things turn around. I know the Coyotes have done a good job, I will say, in the last few days of making trades, utilizing their cap space for now to get picks and prospects for the future. So I do like what they're doing to kind of rebuild the cupboard a little bit, but I just think they had some major opportunities in this draft that they just didn't take advantage of. As a winner is the Los Angeles Kings. I think the Kings were a little bit fortunate, but at the same time did a really good job here as well. Grabbing Brandt Clark with the number 8th overall pick, I think was a tremendous pickup for them. I think having Drew Doughty for him to learn from is going to be tremendous for his development, and I think he can be a similar type of player to Doughty down the road. He's a real exciting defenseman, in my opinion, great puck mover. Yes, there's areas of his game that need to be cleaned up, but you know what? That's going to be common amongst everybody. I'd be highly doubtful of anybody from this NHL draft in 2021 that goes immediately to the NHL. I mean, I'd say Owen Power is probably the only player that's remotely ready, and it sounds like he's going back to school. I wouldn't be shocked if that happened, but considering what's going on in Buffalo, I think between him wanting to go to school where the Sabres are at, I think it's probably wise that he stay in school and just wait a little bit. But at the same time, I'm not sure there's really anybody else that's ready to step in immediately. I think we're looking at 1 or 2 years for a lot of these players, including Brandt Clark. The fact that they took what I thought to be the best player available, as well as the best player for them in this draft at that selection, was a tremendous pickup. They also got Francesco Pinelli, also in the second round. I thought that was a bit of a draft steal for them. I thought they did a really good job in that regard. Overall, I think they did a really good job here, did some great picks, and I really think the LA Kings, who already have a really stacked prospect pool, just continued to be really smart and wise with their selections here. Now, the last team I'm going to mention as a loser is the Montreal Canadiens, and it's really, it's all because of their first round pick. The number 31, the Habs take Logan Mailloux, a controversial player who even himself said he should not be drafted. He was going to go play another year junior in London of the OHL, play for Dale Hunter and the London Knights organization, and maybe try next year. He needed to rebuild his trust. Now, if you don't know the background on this player, essentially what happened is the OHL didn't play this year. So a lot of OHL prospects, at least the higher ranked ones that had more opportunities, got a chance to go play over in Europe. So he was playing in Sweden. Now, the incident that happened that's causing all this controversy actually happened a while back, but it's just kind of becoming more public here in the couple of weeks leading up to the draft. Essentially what happened, and I don't want to go into too much graphic detail, but let's just say he was with a girl doing something intimate, took some pictures of her without her knowledge, and decided to spread them around through social media, mostly I believe through group chat or whatnot. But still, he ended up in a situation where he ended up with charges laid against him in a lawsuit once this became aware and to her attention of what he did. And it obviously shows a really poor judgment of character. He ended up having to pay a fine, and it looks really, really bad, really immature, really wrong, really had a major impact on this girl's life. Comes back to North America once everything became public, it became a lot of teams, once they became aware of it, put him on their do not draft list. Do not draft. They do not want this player because of the character off-ice issues. Now, don't get me wrong, Logan Mailloux is 100% a first-round talent. There's no doubt what he can do on the ice. He's a solid hockey player. But if I'm an NHL GM and I'm drafting players here in the draft, I don't care. I want quality people as well as quality players, and the Montreal Canadiens were completely in disregard to that. Now, it looks bad on Marc Bergevin. They immediately had a statement ready to go out on social media within a matter of a few minutes after the pick. So they knew that they were going to have to answer to this immediately. That it's just so questionable. And not only that, most teams were going to pass on this guy 100%. There were some that felt that maybe a team might use like a third, fourth round pick and take him, even though they probably shouldn't. But if you take him late in the draft, then it's probably less of a big deal. But still, he shouldn't have been drafted at all. Problem is this kid didn't really show a lot of remorse or apologies. He needs to earn the fact that he can be drafted. He needs to earn the fact that he can be trusted. He needs to prove and show the fact that he's learned from this mistake, in my opinion. I believe in second chances. I don't think people should be blackballed forever, but you have to show that you've learned from it. And he's had no opportunity to do that. That's why, like some people, when you do the crime, you do the time. You learn from it. You show that you've been rehabbed and that you can move on and be a better person from it. That has not happened in this case, and I don't feel that it's doing any justice here to let him be drafted. How do you think the victim's looking at this now? She's been victimized and saying he essentially has barely been punished at all, paying a small fine, and now he gets everything he wants to be drafted by an NHL team. Like, it's completely wrong. And I'm extremely disappointed with the Montreal Canadiens on the selection. They did make some really good picks after this, I will say, like Xavier Simoneau. Stenko was another one. Like, they made some good picks. But this one is completely and utterly inexcusable. Now, even Trevor Timmins, who's been with the Hams and worked with Marc Bergevin a long time, was doing a Zoom interview and was asked point blank about why, even though he said he shouldn't be drafted, why they felt it was okay to do this. And he couldn't answer. He sat there looking like a complete dummy in silence. And eventually, right at the end, asked him to kind of clarify what he meant after about 30 to 40 seconds. Like, it looks extremely bad. And we need to change parts of hockey culture. It is getting better, but there's still work to be done. And when you have a team like the Chicago Blackhawks, everything that they're being investigated for, and you know that Marc Bergevin worked there at the time, even though he says he knew nothing, and I'm not going to say that he definitely knew something, but when you're part of that organization and you were around, but obviously you claimed that you didn't know anything, so you didn't do anything. And then they were rumored to be taking on Tony DeAngelo, or trying to, after what happened with the Rangers. It just seems like, you get the impression that maybe they don't care about character. And that really bothers me. And for me, it's enough to be very unhappy with what happened here. And I hope Marc Bergevin's telling the truth, that he really didn't know anything about what happened in Chicago. But it's just when you see a pattern, you start to question things, and it makes you wonder what you can believe. And just for that reason, this is a bad look, and I have to put them on my loser list regardless of what else they did at this draft. Now, one more winner here as well, and we're going to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. Now, the Jets didn't really go out of their way to do anything flashy or really make any big moves or anything, but they were able to take advantage of other teams' mistakes. They had some really good selections, and maybe they were a little bit lucky, but at least they were one of the teams who did not pass up on some of these guys that were, really solid pickups, including Chaz Lucius in the first round, who did fall a little bit, but they were there to snatch him up and take advantage of that. Obviously, he draws a little bit of comparison to a guy they already have in Kyle Connor, a real solid offensive player. Let him slip through their fingers here and miss out on a player of this magnitude. They were certainly looking for skilled players. There's no doubt to see a pattern. Even looking at other guys that they picked up in the draft, including Dmitry Kuzmin, like, they were all players that were ranked much lower than where they got them. Like, they were able to get all these players, anywhere from 10 to 15 picks or 20 picks lower than what they were ranked as. So it just goes to show that obviously they had a different opinion than a lot of NHL teams, and I think those ability to kind of see through what other people were missing out on is going to be a major plus for them, and see what they can do here. I mean, they were not a team that were super deep on picks or anything like that. They didn't do anything crazy or make any big trades, but they just took advantage of people's mistakes, and for that, I give the Winnipeg Jets a great grade and think they're definitely one of the draft winners for the 2021 draft. There's plenty of other teams we could give a winning and losing grade to, but we're not going to go too deep into this. I just wanted to talk about the teams I felt did the best or the worst jobs in today's video. So certainly let me know what teams you feel did a tremendous job, which teams you think did a really poor job, and we can discuss further down in the comment section. But keep in mind, these players were all just drafted. It's probably going to be 4 or 5 years before we really have a clear picture of what they're really going to become, and to really know for sure, without just being opinionated here, on who are the real winners and losers of this draft. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.